everybody, and welcome back. Today, as promised, last time or a while ago, I don't know in which order I will upload videos, I am doing a list of bands, Gothic bands, that you guys might enjoy. Now, the reason I'm making this video is because, as I mentioned in a previous video, I understand that a lot of people might want to be goth, but might not really get into the music genre. Now, the bands are all kind of similar, but there are bands that kind of differ within that. And so, God, there was this YouTuber, I don't remember her name. I'll probably write it somewhere here if I'll check it during, editing. But there was a YouTuber who said basically the same thing I said in the video where I talked about goths not liking Gothic music, that just because you don't like one band doesn't mean you don't like all of the Gothic bands, and so you should give some others a try and you should give them a listen, because the Gothic subculture is basically about music. And so that's what I'm doing. I decided to pick a few bands that are my favorites or that I've listened to the most in general, because I also don't want to give you guys bands to listen to that I don't really particularly know, because, well, if I don't know them and I don't like them, then why should you? You know what I mean? I mean, maybe you would, but my point is that it would be kind of stupid. So I decided that I will, check the bands I like and put them into separate categories within the Gothic genre of music, and you can choose which one you'd like to listen to, and maybe one of those bands will seem cool enough for you so you can get into the subculture and actually know something about the music. Or maybe you don't want to be goth, but some of those bands will just turn out to be bands that you might enjoy. If you know any of those bands and if you like them, tell me in this box below, and now let's get started. So the first subgenre I made up all of these names, okay? Like, the bands are real, but the subgenres are kind of like what I called them, so you might better understand what I want to tell you. So the first one I called light goth. So this is the music that turned up kind of right after the punk phase. It's going to be similar to a lot of Gothic bands that you know, but they're gonna be much lighter. The guitar, the drums, they will be much lighter, and it won't be, well, none of those bands are really like heavy metal, but it will be kind of like more delicate rock than actual hard rock. So that's why I called it light goth. And bands from this subgenre, maybe bands like The Cure, who there's a 90% chance you know their song Friday I'm in Love. And if you know that song, most of their songs are similar to that one. They're happy, they're cheery, I mean not all of them, but a lot. And when it comes to the music, and they're not really that hardcore. So if you want to get into the music, but for instance you don't like some, heavier tones, The Cure is for you. And this light goth thing is for you. And then we have Siouxsie and the Banshees. Now, Siouxsie is a little bit maybe rocky, in my opinion, than The Cure, but it's still not as rocky as some other bands. It's still like a delicate light rock, in my opinion. That's why I put it in here. And so Siouxsie and the Banshees is another band that's great for listening. I personally prefer Siouxsie and the Banshees over The Cure. I also think Siouxsie and the Banshees is a little bit more psychedelic, but it's still not like heavy rock, so I decided to include it on the light goth list. From there, we're going to go into something I called true goth, mostly because a lot of bands in the Gothic community, like Gothic genre, sound similar to those bands. Now, this doesn't mean that this is the ultimate Gothic sound. I just called it true goth because, in my opinion, a lot of the bands sound like this or sound similar to this kind of music. That's why I called it true goth. But that's just kind of my naming, so don't put it anywhere out there on the internet. Between true goth and light goth, we have, maybe I should first say what true goth is. So true goth is basically this very typical, in my opinion, very typical Gothic music. So it's rocky, it's a little bit more heavier, usually it's got a vocalist that has a very deep voice. Not like that, I don't have a deep voice, I'm sorry, I screech a lot. So the vocalist usually has a deep voice, and the music is heavier, more rocky, but also kind of somber. and so that's what true goth is for me, like here. And between light goth and true goth we have two bands. First is Bauhaus. Bauhaus is, I could have put in it in the spooky eerie music part, now that I think of it. So Bauhaus is light, it's not too heavy, but it also has the somber effect that the true goth bands have. So I decided to put it kind of in between. It's also in between eerie spooky, because a lot of Bauhaus's songs are very eerie and spooky, like Hollow Hills is just bloody creepy. Hollow Hills is probably the creepiest song I've ever heard in my life. So Bauhaus is kind of in between a few genres. I know Bauhaus is one of my favorite bands, so you know, just putting it out there. Another band is Skeletal Family. It leans a little bit more to the heavy side, but it's not as heavy as some bands in my opinion. As I mentioned, opinions may differ. This is how I'm trying to phrase these bands, so you see that there are different types of gothic bands. So in my opinion, Skeletal Family is a little bit more heavy. That's why I put it in the middle, but it's not like super heavy, and so I decided to, well, it's heavier than Bauhaus, definitely. Bauhaus is like very chill in my opinion. So yeah. Going to True God, there are another two bands. Sisters of Mercy, which is my probably all-time favorite goth band, even though Andrew Eldridge claims he is not goth and he hates goths, but never mind. Sisters of Mercy is like the typical goth band for me. When I think goth band, I think about Sisters of Mercy, because like I know they weren't like the first band. I don't know if they were even one of the first, probably one of the first, but definitely not the first bands, like not in the top first bands. But a lot of bands today, in my opinion, especially like the new ones, sound a lot like Sisters of Mercy. That's why I put it in here. And the other one is the 69 Eyes, which is a Finnish band. It's on Wikipedia, it's written that it's also kind of like glam metal. Not only, it's like gothic rock glam metal. So it's a little bit harder, but it's also kind of somber and also similar, in my opinion, to Sisters of Mercy. The vocalist has a similar vocal tone to the Andrew Eldridge from Sisters of Mercy, so I think those two bands really fit in nicely there. True goth, we're gonna go to punk. Now, I'm not saying this isn't like punk, but when gothic music became, like, existed, before we became gothic music, there was like this in between. We were somewhat in between punk, because we came from punk, somewhat between punk and like gothic rock, new wave, however you want to call it. And the bands I'm going to talk about are like in the in-between. It's like this punk goth bands. They're not really punk, not really goth, they're somewhere in between. A little bit of punk, a little bit of goth. And between the punk and true goth, so a band that is more to true goth, closer to true goth than to punk, I put Fields of the Nephilim. In my opinion, it is a little punky band. Like, not punk, but like, it's a little bit more punky than maybe other bands. That is only my opinion. If you think it's not, that's totally fine. So I've put Fields of the Nephilim in between. And a band that is, I think it was like one of the literally first gothic bands, and it derived from punk very heavily. I think it was considered a punk band in the beginning anyway, is Alien Sex Fiend, and it's like very hardcore death rock. Well, maybe not very hardcore, but I don't really, I used to listen to Alien Sex Fiend a lot. It became a little bit too heavy for me, because like with age I decided that lighter tones are better for me, and so I don't listen to Alien Sex Fiend that much. But if you're someone who, for instance, only heard The Cure and Juicy and decided, okay, this is too light for me, I prefer darker, like heavier tones, I don't like this, then Alien Sex Fiend may be a band for you, because in my opinion at least, it's a little bit more heavier, a little bit more punkish. I don't know if I would call it a metalish, but maybe metalish, I don't know, definitely more punkish than like light goth, like The Cure or like Juicy and the Banshees. From there I wanna go to electronic gothic music. Well, it's not really electronic, but it's more electronic than a lot of bands in my opinion. That is Depeche Mode. So Depeche Mode, it's also a lighter band. It's not heavy, it's not dark in my opinion in any way. It's a little bit somber, but it has the, like, if you know Enjoy the Silence, everyone knows Enjoy the Silence in my opinion. Like, that song is bloody everywhere. So that's Depeche Mode song, and it is a little bit more electronical than a lot of the bands that I mentioned. but it's still considered a goth band. So if you, for instance, prefer electronical music but still want to get into goth bands, Depeche Mode would be definitely a band I'd tell you to listen to. I mean, not tell you that you have to, but like you can. Another type of music is folk. I don't know a lot of gothic folk bands because I listen to a lot of folk rock, folk metal, but I don't know which of that really falls under the goth rock category. Oh, I cannot speak. So I'm not going to put a lot of bands here because I don't want to mislead you. There is one band, however, that I do listen to that in my opinion is pretty folkish and is considered a goth band, and that is Dead Can Dance. Now they're not your typical goth band like Korpi Klani, for instance, if you know that Finnish band. So that's like typical goth, not goth, folk metal for me. So Dead Can Dance isn't that typical. It's a little kind of different folk music. When I read up on them some time ago, the music they take is not so much, I mean, some of it is like European folk, but it's also a little bit of African folk, and so it might be something different for you, but it's still folkish goth music. So if you're more into folk music, Dead Can Dance is a super great band in my opinion. I have loved them for a long while, and I think they're amazing, and as I mentioned, especially if you like folk music, that's a band you might enjoy. On the not so goth, yeah, I made a band called Not So Goth. I mean, not made a band, I just made the genre. So we have also Nick Cave, who is also one of my all-time favorite vocalists, and his band's called Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. And I called him Not So Goth because he is like light goth, but his music isn't that gothy. I think the only reason why he's considered a goth band is because he sings about murder, and because I think he was one of the bands who sang in the Batcave back in the days. I may be wrong. I personally adore Nick Cave. I was raised on Nick Cave. My dad showed me Nick Cave when I was a kid, so you know, like, I know his shit for so long, and I listened to him before I even knew he was goth, before I was goth, so he has a special place in my tiny heart, and I personally adore him. He is considered a goth vocalist, a goth artist. The band is considered goth. I don't really know if they're that much goth, that's why I called it Not So Good Goth, because it doesn't really sound like most goth bands, but Nick Cave is amazing. He sings a lot of ballads. His music differs a bit from album to album, to be honest. Like, Murder Ballads is really very different than Push the Sky Away. I love both albums, but they are super different. So Murder Ballads are basically like rocky ballads about murders, and Push the Sky Away is more somber, delicate, less rocky. So, you know, Nick Cave has a whole range of genres that he performs, but I still think he's a bloody amazing artist, and he's not like super goth, so maybe you could check that out if you're not into goth music, because Nick Cave might just have something for you. And at the end I decided that, I mean, who would I be if I wouldn't be spooky and creepy, right? So we've got two bands that are kind of like spooky, creepy a little bit, but also a little bit medieval in my opinion. The first one is called Lacrimosa. I think it's a German-Swiss band, and they have some songs that are more rocky, more heavy, more like true goth, but they have a lot of songs that are more medievalish, spooky, eerie, in my opinion, and so they're kind of like in between. But you also have a band, well, it's not a band, it's actually an artist, I think it's also a German artist, by the way, called Anne Varney, and I think Anne Varney is a male or a transgender, I'm not sure, but she or he, I'm sorry, I don't want to mispronounce anyone, I'm just not really sure his gender. He has a very, very, well, deeper male voice in general, but he, she, I'm sorry, this is so weird, but as I mentioned, I don't want to mispronounce her, and I'm not really sure about this. I haven't really checked up on her. I listened to her music, or his, okay, I'm gonna call her because her name is Anne Varney. I listened to her music, and I'm a fan of her music, but I don't really have a tendency to, you know, to read up about artists and, you know, like, oh my god, I need to know everything. So yeah, I'm sorry, this is kind of my fault. But her music is very eerie, very spooky, and god, I just adore her vocals. I adore her. It's very medieval in my opinion, so if you prefer those eerie, spooky, medievalish things, if you're into medieval goth, I think Anne Varney might be for you. Yeah, she's a great vocalist. The songs are just so unique in my opinion. I've never heard anything like that, and yeah, I think that's all I gotta say. Sorry for the rambling, sorry if the video is kind of long. I know I can't get my words together sometimes, but I just thought that, you know, those bands might be something you might enjoy. I'm probably gonna link them, I mean not link, but like list the bands down below so you can, if you don't want to watch the whole video or something. But yeah, hope you enjoyed. Please comment something nice, comment what you think about those bands, leave a like, subscribe to my potato face, and I hope to see you next time.